my story, my personal story is I grew up in New York City. I'm in the amidst hip hop culture. But my father was a conservative Christian, so he did not allow me to participate in it. So I sort of gleaned it as a kid looking over the fence, and yet going to a public school sort of gets in you. I would visit people, things would be on the TV, in other homes, and I grabbed it. Eventually, I would go to visit. I had some relatives. My relatives are in Norfolk, Virginia. I would go to VA, and there I would be fully exposed to everything that I could not be exposed to in my father's house because he wasn't having it. They would give us Walkmans or whatever, and for those of you who don't know what Walkmans are, little radios, put your headphones on. Long story short, I would go back to New York, and I would basically, it would just go in me. I think God, by His providence, had already determined that I was going to be a man of the hip hop context and eventually a missionary to the hip hop context. So He let it get in me anyway. So it was just in me. I ran away from home at 13 because I wanted to get away from the narrow way. I wanted freedom to be able to enjoy what regular people enjoy. So I go to live with my family that was living regularly, secularly. No Jesus in the picture other than, we know Jesus. I went down there, wild out, long story short. I meet DJs. I grow up in the hip-hop context, house parties. I mean, hip-hop, everything. Sun up to sundown. And so, eventually, I had this theological foundation, then this cultural inundation. Then at 18, I start coming back to the Lord. 19, I go to Bible college. So I'm sandwiched. Now I'm in Bible college, and I'm hearing all of the answers I did not have when I used to be on the streets and I heard the 5%ers. So when I was about 17, 18, the 5% Nation was really influential in hip-hop. So I met the 5% perspective in hip-hop, and it reawakened in me the theology that I knew that was dormant and that was buried. So I became invigorated by theology meets hip-hop, hip-hop meets theology, by listening to people who did not have a Christian theology. In fact, they were very hostile to the Christian theology. But that awakened in me, like David, who went to give his brothers food when they were standing at the battle with Goliath. And as soon as David heard it, he said, "Who's the uncircumcised Philistine that's chumping the armies of the living God?" That's sort of what awakened me, as I heard hip-hop sort of chumping the Lord Jesus. I referred in another interview about Nas. People don't know that when Nas came out, he was very hostile to Jesus Christ. Back in the days, there was an article that his cover for Illmatic was going to be him with Jesus in a headlock. But his label wouldn't let him do it. That was the tone then. And it invoked in me a desire to rep him in the opposite direction, rep him very robustly and strongly. So that began to produce the seeds of what became Christology in layman's terms. As I went to Christian school, Bible college, of course, Christology, or our theology, you have a heavy Christology section, that began to rock me and fuel me. And Jesus is the key to the whole Bible. Jesus is the peak of God's revelation. Jesus is the glorious Son that God sent because He loved people, and I wanted to rep Him. So hip-hop was going to encounter a version of Christ that was different than the one they had by running into me. That started Christology. That was the context. The moments was all memorable because you don't know that you're creating an album. Like, I didn't know I was creating an album. Back then you just did music. So I was just doing music. So again, so this was me back then. I'm a momentum person. So I could sit on a crate in ball shorts for 4 straight days. Like, other than like go out, run out, get something to eat to stop the shakes. So like, oh, chap, I haven't eaten. It's been 8 hours. But not shower, not anything. Not brush my teeth 4 days. I mean, that's literally how it can happen. I get into it. Christology was basically written on a crate, in a home, and or in another home, on a bedside. Like, it was done in the most crusty fashion. And eventually, the product made its way to a good studio. The dude, the engineer, I won't mention his name. I was there by myself. I was used to doing stuff with Cross Movement. I did feel kind of abandoned by Cross Movement during that time because like nobody was around during that time, so I felt alone. But I remember sitting in there while the dude was mixing, and the dude would sleep for hours. It's almost like he was like letting the time go. Then he would wake up like, oh snap, it's almost time for the session to be over. And then flick a few buttons and make it sound good. I was like, you could have did this and saved me 4 hours. And that time we were paying for studio time like pricey. It wasn't like now. So 2 memorable moments. Basically done on a crate in ball shorts, crusty, no shower. And then mixed by a dude who slept for half of the mixing of every song. And then woke up and just threw some knobs together. But, you know, the Lord blessed the feeble, frail work to be something that has been very memorable in people's Christian journey. I don't remember the day when I realized, oh snap, people like it. I thought that the reception in-house was very temperate. I mean, from CM to everybody, there was no hype about it. It wasn't even like, yo, you killed it. No. It was almost like matter of fact, no, yo, this is the joint. So I thought it was a disappointment. There's one dude I worked on, I keep his name under wraps. One dude I worked on the project, we seemed like we had a dope relationship. Seemed like after we did stuff, seemed like he was almost depressed. Almost like, man, you let me down on this joint. And I mean, it just seemed like the relationship went down. I thought people didn't like it because my in-house was very lukewarm with their response. But years later, I went and I saw it at DTS, Dallas Theological Seminary. They had it in their bookstore. And that's when I realized, yo, y'all got it, and y'all like it. So it was a couple years later that I realized it was doing something. And of course, every year since then, I realized, and I never toured it, I never focused on it, I never gave it what I could have given it because I was just doing cross movement stuff, and I wanted to prioritize the collective. So I don't feel cheated by it. It was a philosophical decision to not make a individualized name, but I do feel like I never really focused on it as a successful entity at all. Like it's almost like Nas and Illmatic. It feels like, I don't mean to act like Christology is something that special, but sometimes people only know that CD. I met a dude, Furlough, Keyshawn, right? He said, yo man, the thesis was my joint. I said, word? And I lit up. Because there are people who, if their start was Christology, like they don't know any other project. They'll be like, yo, but you gotta hear his Christology. I'll be like, yeah man, because I was sharing my heart on such and such. Yeah, but you gotta hear his Christology. Yo man, that dude, the Christ. I'll be like, dang, like, have y'all ever been able to appreciate anything else that I've ever done? And you would think for most people, no, because for them, it's all about Christology. Again, KRS-One, that was one of his things when he hit us up. He was like, yo, that Christology? He was like, yo, that thing is crazy. Again, all the dudes that are doing something now would pin that as the magnum opus of Ambassador.